Hi, welcome to Kastoshi, and today we talk to Alex Zeltcer of nSure.ai. Hi, Alex.
Hey Zubair, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good. So, could we start by you telling us the quick pitch for nSure.ai? Like, why should anybody care?
Sure. So nSure.ai is a payment fraud prevention platform. We've established it after being a merchant on our own and suffering enormous amount of chargebacks while selling digital gift cards, which are extremely fraudster attractive. And once we realized that this is a problem that spans way beyond the digital gift card market, decided to and create a company that is dedicated to solving that kind of problem. And the real problem we solve is a payment fraud issue that happens online only. And what most people don't know is that when payment fraud happens online, it's the liability of the merchant, which means if you as a consumer see a line on your credit card statement you don't recognize and you call your issuer bank and say, guys, that's not my transaction, I want to get my money back, you normally don't know and obviously don't care where it comes from because someone has to pay for it. Now, if it's a card present transaction or anything that's done in brick and mortar, the banks take the liability and they solve it between themselves. If it's a card not present transaction or anything that happens online and slightly beyond that, the liability lies with the merchant who has actually sold the merchandise. So he's eventually left without the merchandise and with the chargeback, meaning without the cash. Now, this is specifically painful or more painful for some of the merchants, specifically for those that deal with what we call digital goods, digital assets, digital services, anything that is immediately transferable, means it doesn't need a truck to get delivered to your doorstep, but it is delivered in an email, a text message, a WhatsApp, or whatever. And then the second thing is it can be resold online, so it has liquidity. There's a liquid aspect to it. So when you look at these type of goods, the immediate delivery nature of the product has created two specific issues. The first one, if you think about a merchant selling fashion or consumer electronics, they have time to reassess the risk on the transaction all the way through until the FedEx truck stops by the doorstep and leaves the package, right? Because if they stop the delivery at any given point in time before that happens, nothing happened from their perspective. And usually that happens a few hours, at least a few hours, sometimes a couple of days, and you have time to reassess the risk. It completely changes the game. If you think about it, a lot of people get text messages today for notifying them about a transaction. People can say, no, that I didn't do that. And obviously the transaction is not going to go through. A lot is still done overnight with batches, with Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and they can flag the transaction as being fraudulent at that point in time. And when that happens, you stop the transaction, nothing happens, and most of the risk gets blocked by that, let's call it delayed delivery. And that has created an issue where the standard or legacy fraud prevention platforms are used to the fact that they have time to reassess the risk within hours or days after. Now, if you're selling crypto or you're selling a gift card or you're selling a game on Xbox, there's no chance, right? You sold the game, you sold the gift cards, it's gone. There's nothing you can do about it. You have to take the decision immediately. That changes the risk profile.
So, what is the incentive online with chargebacks? Do credit card companies make money?
No. So it's not an issue of the credit cards that make money on that. It's the issue that they're not liable. The fact is they don't care about it because they don't pay out of pocket. It's as simple as that. And so let me take a step back. It's interesting how this thing happened. Why
This is where I wanted to come to you, because I'll try and tie it into your personal story as well, because I want to know how you got here as well. Because
Sure.
I read about you online, and you did mention that you started at about 40 in entrepreneurship. So this is very interesting because for me.
Yeah, so if you look at the history of online payments in general, or if you look at credit, let's start from credit cards, right? In the 50s. So imagine the setup, right? So you have Bank of America creating the first credit card. They go into a grocery store and tell the guy at the cash register, you're used to people coming in giving you coins and bills and whatever, and you give them the cheese, right? They give you the $10, you give them the cheese. Now tomorrow there's going to come in a person with a plastic card that you've never seen before. It'll have numbers etched into it. We'll give you a small machine. You'll take a few pieces of paper with carbon copy between them. You'll put it in that machine. You'll do this strange swiping
Yeah.
gesture. You'll get the number etched into your now copied into your paper. You write down $10. You'll have the customer sign. You'll put it in your cash register, and you give them the cheese. The guys looked at them and said, "Guys, sorry, you're missing the point. I'm a retailer. I'm not giving the cheese until I see the $10. Not going to happen." So they said, "Don't worry about that. We're a bank. We're regulated by the government. If you have that piece of paper and it's signed, it's the same as having a bill. It's the same thing as having the cash. You're guaranteed to get the $10. But otherwise, by the way, it would never have started. Right? No one would accept it." So that was on one end. On the other hand, they did the same, right? Because up to that point in time, if you lost your wallet, you lost $100 or 150, whatever is in there. Now, when you lose that piece of plastic, you may lose your entire bank account. No one would carry their bank account in their pocket, right? It doesn't make sense. Now think about a couple of months later, that grocery store gives them a call and says, I have a great client. His name is Zubair. He calls me every Tuesday, and he places an order for about $1,000. And then he comes in on Friday in the afternoon at the worst possible time, right? There's a huge line. He has to stand through that line. He has to give me that piece of plastic. I have to do this strange gesture you asked me to do, put it in the cash register, give him the packages that are already ready for him, and then he walks. We all understand it's just the number, right? So when I speak to him on the phone, he gives me the order. I can write it down on that same piece of paper you gave me. Instead of doing that gesture, I'll write it down. He comes in, he'll sign the paper, whatever you want. He'll sign the paper, whatever you want to do, all good. And then I'll give him the groceries, and he doesn't have to stand in line, nothing. It's all good. And they said, you know what? It sounds like it sounds great, right? Because God forbid he may come in and pay you cash. We don't want that to happen, right? We prefer that he pays with a credit card, and he can do that on the phone. However, you only take the transaction if you recognize the person. If you recognize his voice, you know him, it's someone you trust, because we're not going to guarantee that transaction. You haven't seen the card. You don't know who that is. We're not going to guarantee these transactions. And that's how this card not present transaction concept was born. So that's that. And then 20 years later,
that's card holder not present, yeah?
Sorry?
That means card holder not present.
No, it's card not present. It's called card not present, not card holder. It's
it means they haven't seen the physical card. Yeah.
You haven't seen the physical card. That was at the time, there was nothing else, right? It's only physical. Now, 20 years later, they go again and they call the bank, and they say, there's a new thing. It's called the internet. And the bank asks, the internet what? And they say, yeah, the internet. It's the internet, and you can take transactions there. The bank listens to the story and say, no problem. You can take the transactions. It's a card not present transaction, right? The card was not there. It's your liability. If you want to take it, we're very happy. We prefer that you do. We're not going to guarantee these transactions. And that's how that, it's born in sin, right? There's no reason for that not to be the bank's liability. No reason. And that's the case today.
Actually, just taking a quick tour to crypto, is this something that if people paid, for example, with USDC or some stable coin in crypto, like could be Tether or something, would that get rid of this problem?
Yes. Today, yes. The issue with that, I think, is the fact that it is non-reversible is what creates a problem on the other side for the consumers, where they know, if you pay with a credit card, unless you get stuck with a bank that you wouldn't mention the name, right? You know that you can reverse the transaction. Same is true if you transfer funds out of your bank. If you can prove that you did not intend to, it was a mistake or whatever, the regulation is going to help you receive the funds back, because the regulation is always for the consumer. If you do the same for USDC, for instance, it's done, right? You've transferred the funds, it's in someone else's wallet. You're never going to see that again. There's nothing you can do except for that person or company that you've delivered, that you've transferred it to, and say, okay, you're right, we're going to return it. There's nothing that guarantees that that's going to happen. However, it does completely resolve the chargeback issue, because a chargeback, again, is something that happens when I as a consumer, I pay for something, or a fraudster pays for something online to a merchant using a stolen credit card. And then the original owner of the credit card says, hey guys, that's not my purchase. And then the merchant is out of pocket. In this case, if the merchant accepts USDC or any kind of crypto for that matter, regardless if it's a stable coin or not, it's done. Once that crypto is transferred, it's his. No one can take it away. So yes, if you're a merchant and you're accepting only crypto online, you don't have that problem. It's done. So you remember I said the first problem that digital good merchants or digital asset merchants have is the fact that the delivery is immediate, and as a result of that, the risk profile is different, right? You don't have the time to reassess the risk, and as a result of that, the fraud prevention platforms are not used to that risk profile, so they're a bit confused. That's one, or they see a risk profile they don't recognize. The second piece is, and which is why crypto is so attractive to fraudsters or gift cards or tickets, for that matter, is the fact that you can commit fraud at scale. And even more interesting is that once you started using that list of stolen financial instruments that you acquired, there's a window of opportunity, right? There's a window of time. Someone's going to notice that something's wrong, and they're going to shut it down. So the list is going to be shut down within a matter of hours since the time you started using it. So you have to do it fast. And since the incentive is so high, you're willing to invest in it. You create machines that do that. So what you're actually seeing in crypto are machines that attack these exchanges or on-ramps using fraudulent payment instruments, either credit cards or PayPal accounts or even bank accounts, to try and get their hands on crypto. And once they got the crypto, it's done. They remove the card from their list. They got their ROI. Now they go and if they want to, they turn the crypto back to cash, or they keep it as crypto. And that's what creates the issue. And if you look at crypto, again, the problem is it is so attractive to fraudsters, and the fraud problem there, we call it fraud pressure, right? The amount of fraud that comes is so high that, and without the right tools, the only tool you have in your hands is declining a lot of current transactions. Because if you think about it, it's always a game, right? You have, imagine yourself as a fraud prevention guy, right? What do? You see traffic coming in. If someone tells you, hey, you need to get fraud down to zero, that's very easy. You accept zero transactions, zero fraud, no problem. But by the way, that's the only way to guarantee zero.
Do crypto exchanges keep quiet about this? Because I don't hear them say much about it.
Oh, they do. They do. If you talk to them, you'll see how. If you think about, are you familiar with the term on ramp?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
look
you mean like KYCing their customers and then
but the on ramp, there are on ramp solutions, right? So there's an exchange and there's an on ramp solution. An on ramp solution is a company such as MoonPay, I think, is the most well known. But Ramp Networks is one, Banxa is one, Circle is one, Mercurial is one. There are many of those. The only thing they do, generally speaking, is they take care of the fiat to crypto. That's it. And the reason for that is that no one else knows, because the fraud level is so high. The crypto exchanges, they don't want to touch it. They don't know how to deal with it. They're saying someone else fix the problem. And so the problem is transferred to these on-ramp solutions in most cases, right? If you're a Binance, you do it on your own. If if you're a Coinbase, you do it on your own. If you're a smaller exchange, you go to an on-ramp solution. And then the on-ramp solutions are those that are taking care of the problem. And what they do is they decline a hefty part of the transactions. I can tell you we have a few of them as our clients. Before we were implemented, they were declining somewhere in the range of 55 to 60% of the transactions.
Wow.
55 to 60% of the people that came online and that gave you the credit card information, right? They said yes to the purchase. You decline 55 to 60% of them.
Oh, wow.
It's insane. That's the size of the problem.
And after they used you, how much do they decline?
That's a good question. That's an interesting question. So we take them from a 60% decline rate to roughly half that, to 30. And a part of it is done by the networks, by Visa, MasterCard, right? Which we cannot really help with, right? We cannot make them take the transaction. So some of it is done by the banks. We cannot help. We can help on the fraud screening side, where today we guarantee more than 90% approval rate on that piece. And the second piece where we can really help is on KYC, which you just mentioned, right? That everybody knows you have to go through KYC. However, what's interesting about it is that KYC is required by regulation today in most countries in the world when you are transacting in crypto, but it is not required for every transaction, and it is not required from zero. It is required, for instance, in the EU, it's required if you go above 2,500 euros for a certain period of time. In the US, it's $3,000. The reason, by the way, is that KYC is not necessarily a fraud prevention measure. It is an anti-money laundering measure. So you remember the thing we're trying to stop is scalable fraud. It's when someone has created a machine and they all come. It seems like a long list of seemingly legitimate individuals coming in, and they're trying to buy the inventory. It's very similar to, if you know what distributed denial of service is.
DDoS attacks. Yeah,
exactly. It's very similar. From you look at from a pattern perspective, it looks like a DDoS.
Okay.
And then what do you do? So I'll give you one example. Let's say you see a consumer coming in and he hesitates 12.3 seconds before he decides on whether to buy Bitcoin or Ether. And then you can't say anything about it. A second later, someone comes in and he hesitates 12.3 seconds as well. Okay, let's take a look at that. And imagine what happens on the 5th or 6th. If you're looking at it and trying to match it, then you'll see, okay, it looks like they're all coming from different places. The IP addresses are different countries, different payment methods. It looks very similar in behavior. It looks like a ring. It looks like they all come from one place. We're going to stop that.
Oh, so you see patterns.
Exactly.
So this means that if someone uses your service, they'll probably need some JavaScript or some code embedded in their site. And you watch how the user behaves, and you look for patterns in there, which you analyze with AI, and you feed.
I look at everything. I look at every click, every gesture, everything you do on the website, regardless of the transaction itself. So I'm keeping I have device fingerprinting and all of that. So I'm keeping track of what you're doing. It sounds scary, but everything's GDPR compliant, where we're not sharing that with anyone. We're only using that to identify whether someone is now taking advantage of the situation.
As a company, then, how you've been going since? Is it 2013? Is it?
No. So we had a company that was a gift card marketplace that was started in 13, even a little bit earlier than that. nSure has been around only from 19. We've started.
Okay. And you're doing well. You're doing well, aren't you? nSure.
We're doing amazingly well. Not sharing numbers, but yes.
And you're still growing. Yeah.
We're growing last year. So we're now looking at the numbers compared to last year, where we've grown from a revenue perspective almost 300%.
And the worse the economy gets, the better you do, because people want to save money and get more business.
So there are two sides to everything, right? So yes, people are more interested in getting that type of service, because basically it says we can get you more of the same traffic. Don't do any marketing expenses. We get you more. And on the other hand, we tell them, don't send it to manual review. We'll do it automatically. And it costs less. If you send anything to manual review, it costs less. It costs more than a system. So yes, we have these levers that we can use. However, deals are slower. So there are more approvals, and ours are, I would say, we don't do less than 6-figure deals. And some of the deals are 7 figures. And it takes time. It just takes time. So I can tell you, we got delayed probably by 4 months on one of the biggest deals we've done this year. We got delayed by 4 months because it had to go through 2 more approval stages that we had no idea it has.
That's the sales cycle, I guess. Long sales cycle.
And now it takes a bit longer because of the economy.
I mean, where do you think we'll be in 5 or 10 years? Do you think we'll be in a good place or a bad place for consumers? Who will the winners be? Will Visa and MasterCard survive? Where do you see it?
Good question. It's a good question. I think Visa and MasterCard are almost too big to fail, right? I don't see them.
Never say too big to fail. You never know.
Yeah, you're right. Not today. Not in the crypto world today, right? But I think that I don't see them failing, and they do a really good job at what they do. But I do believe that a few things will happen. Number one is we will see the regulation change and requiring the banks to take liability for the problem.
Oh, really?
Yes, I believe so.
Well, why is that? What do you think will be the push for that?
Because it's a mistake. It should never have happened. And they realize it. right? So the merchants are fighting to get it back to the banks because they're saying, guys, I understand when we just started the internet in the 2000s and or the 90s, and people thought that it's okay for these transactions to be card not present and not protected. I guess it's okay. Today, it's trillions of dollars that are being transacted, and people eventually suffer. So, because maybe you're not seeing that because the consumer gets taken care of. We're paying for payment fraud prevention, right? We're paying for that. Who do you think pays for that eventually? Are we not taking that back to the consumer? Obviously, we are.
But they need some for banks to change. There'll need to be a counterforce. Is that companies like yourself?
So yeah. So for me, it doesn't really matter if I sell to the banks or to the merchants, right? The service is required, right? The ability to detect fraud online is not going to change. It's going to change who needs to do that. So in my opinion, it's an opinion. I don't know, right? But it's an opinion. I believe that it'll go. The liability will slowly, not immediately, slowly shift to the banks. And as a result of that, we'll see better performance. And we'll see, so for the consumer, it'll be a better, and for the merchants, it'll be a better solution, in my opinion. And it'll make the fraudsters' lives harder. And by the way, when that happens, they go elsewhere, right? So, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but you probably remember what EMV is, right? The fact that you need to key in your code on the, for credit cards, right? If you go with a credit card now, the last country I think in the world that did that was the US, as usual. So today you have EMV in the US as well, so you have to key in your code when you're using the card physically, right? When that happened, you could see a huge spike in online fraud because it created an obstacle for the fraudsters that used physical systems, because now you need another step. And it created, an obstacle. They moved online. The same would happen once the banks take the liability and become better at it. Fraudsters would find different ways of committing fraud. It'll move either to account takeovers, which we're seeing a little bit happen today. Taking over your account in the bank, etc. It'll move to different avenues. So if I'd had to predict the future from that perspective, is number one, I would see the banks take a bigger chunk of the liability, and as a result of that, fraudsters moving to adjust to that and commit fraud in different ways. Right. So today, if you look at payment processors, everybody has some kind of a solution on their own, right? Either they bought something or they've created one for their own. Usually these are rule-based systems, rule-based systems that are not very effective against scalable fraud. And yes, I do believe we've had a discussion with a number of interesting processors in the last year. And yes, we will see our service being distributed by them or being embedded within their solution for high risk. So we will see that happen, and we will see more and more of that, I'm sure. Even today, you'd see fraud prevention platforms that are part of a processor solution. You'd see that. So yes, I believe that would happen. And if I look at the overall industry, I believe more and more of that would be, as I mentioned, would go towards the banks. And I think that specifically, if you look at crypto, I think that one of the things that we'll see happen in crypto is we will see reversals. We will see that at some point, reversals in crypto would become possible. It's very different.
It's already there. It's already there with some. In Ethereum, some people have already implemented it.
Exactly. So there are certain level 3, I think, protocols that would allow for that, and I think that would be essential for mass adoption, because that feeling of you press the button, it's gone, there's nothing you can do about it, is tough for people. It's tough for people. So I think that we'll see that happen. And when we see that happen, we'll see bigger adoption of crypto. And if you combine that with what's going on with Web3, even though it's stalled at this point, but if you combine that, I think we'll see a lot of this virtual world that becomes a lot more payment savvy. We're dedicating a lot of our resources today to deal both with crypto and NFTs. Even though the market dynamics there are not great, it doesn't mean that the opportunity is not there. So we're investing a lot in that to identify how can we help these industries, because I personally believe that would create a whole new economy. So if I had to guess where you'd see payment fraud prevention platforms going in the future. It's to the banks on one hand, on the fiat level, and to the virtual world on, on the other, on Web3.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Okay. Okay, so I think that's all my questions. So for the sake of the audio listeners, could you just spell your company website and where they can find you?
Sure. So if you're interested, guys, it's nSure.ai. It's NSURE, like the letter N and then the word sure, nSure.ai. That's it.
Okay, great. Nice and simple. All right. Thanks so much for your time today. It was very interesting and I learned a lot from that. Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot, Zubair. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks.